Imagine spending years looking forward to a surgery that promises to give you your vision back, and then walking out of the operating room feeling like something went wrong. It sounds like a nightmare, but here's the truth. Almost nobody tells you before you sign the consent form. Cataract surgery has one of the highest success rates of any procedure in modern medicine, and yet a small percentage of patients still end up disappointed. Not because the surgeon made a mistake, not because the technology failed, but because of choices, expectations, and conversations that either happened too late or didn't happen at all. If you or someone you love is getting ready for cataract surgery, I want you to sit with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to share could be the difference between joining the overwhelming majority of patients who say, "I wish I'd done this sooner," and becoming one of the rare few who says, "I wish someone had told me this beforehand." I'm an ophthalmologist, and I've spent years in the operating room and in consultation rooms listening to patients before and after their surgery. And over time, I started noticing a pattern. The handful of patients who walked away unhappy weren't unhappy because of bad luck. They were unhappy because there was a gap somewhere between what they expected and what was medically realistic. And that gap almost always traces back to the same handful of conversations that either happened too late, happened too fast, or never happened at all. Here's something worth remembering before we even start. Cataract surgery is statistically one of the safest and most successful procedures performed anywhere in medicine. Millions of these surgeries happen every single year, and the satisfaction rates are genuinely remarkable, often cited well above 95%. So nothing you're about to hear is meant to scare you away from a surgery that, for most people, restores independence, safety, and quality of life in a way few other procedures can match. Instead, think of this as the pre-surgery conversation you deserve to have, but might not get in a rushed 15-minute appointment. Because the people who regret this surgery almost never regret the decision to have it done. They regret not asking one more question beforehand. So today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 biggest reasons patients regret cataract surgery, and more importantly, exactly what you can do, starting right now, to make sure you're never one of them. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what questions to bring to your own consultation, and you'll understand your own eyes and your own lifestyle well enough to make a genuinely informed decision rather than a rushed one. Let's get into it. Reason number 1, the vision after surgery didn't match the picture in their head. This is, without question, the single biggest source of regret I encounter, and it almost always comes down to one thing: the type of lens implant that gets placed inside the eye during surgery. Most people don't realize that when your cloudy natural lens is removed, it has to be replaced with an artificial one. And that artificial lens comes in different varieties, each with its own set of trade-offs. Nobody sits you down before surgery and says, "Here's exactly what you're going to see, and here's what you won't." So let's fix that right now. On one end, you have what are called multifocal or extended depth of focus lenses. These are the premium options, and their whole selling point is range. Instead of locking your eyes into one single focal distance, they split incoming light across multiple focal points, which theoretically lets you see clearly up close, in the middle distance, and far away, all without needing reading glasses. On paper, that sounds like the dream, and for a lot of patients, it genuinely is. But here's what almost never gets explained clearly enough. To gain that range, you give something up. Because the light is being divided rather than focused entirely on one point, contrast sensitivity takes a hit. In practical terms, this means that in dim lighting, edges look a little softer, details are a touch harder to pick out, and the sharpness you might be picturing simply isn't part of the deal. On top of that, these lenses have a very distinctive ring design, and that design tends to create glare, halos, and starbursts around lights at night. Headlights on the highway, street lamps, your porch light. They can all develop a hazy, radiating quality that some patients find mildly annoying and others find genuinely bothersome. And even with all of that range, there are still moments, usually in low light or when looking at very fine print, where you might need a light pair of reading glasses anyway. None of this makes multifocal lenses a bad choice. The overwhelming majority of patients who choose them are thrilled with the results. But satisfaction depends entirely on whether you knew about these trade-offs beforehand or whether you walked in expecting flawless, glasses-free vision at every distance and every lighting condition, because that promise simply doesn't exist. No lens implant, no matter how advanced, can fully recreate the flexible, effortless focusing ability you had in your 20s. Managing that expectation before surgery is everything. Now flip to the other end of the spectrum, the standard monofocal lens, the one most commonly covered by insurance. This lens gives you one crisp, clear focal point, and most patients set that point for distance vision. Sounds simple enough, right? Except here's the catch that catches so many people off guard. If your entire life you've been nearsighted, meaning you could always read a book or check your phone without glasses but needed them for driving, then setting your new lens for distance vision is a massive shift. Suddenly, that close-up world you always SAW clearly. Your phone screen, your dashboard, the stove while you're cooking becomes a blur. You might pass the eye chart with flying colors, technically seeing 20/20 at distance, and still walk away frustrated because now you're fumbling for reading glasses dozens of times a day for things you never needed glasses for before. This is exactly why the conversation you have with your surgeon before surgery matters so much. It's not just about picking a lens, it's about picking a lifestyle. Before your consultation, take 10 minutes and genuinely think through your day. How much are you driving, and do you need to spot road signs and oncoming cars clearly? How much time do you spend on a laptop or desktop, which sits in that awkward intermediate zone? How often are you scrolling on your phone, texting, reading a book, or checking labels? While cooking? Do you knit, garden, play a musical instrument, or work with your hands in ways that demand sharp near vision? These aren't throwaway questions. With a standard monofocal lens, you and your surgeon are locking in one single distance as your priority at Y, and everything outside that distance will need glasses to correct. Walking into that consultation already knowing your priorities means you're making an informed decision rather than reacting with surprise 6 weeks after surgery. There's one more twist to this story that catches people off guard, and it involves astigmatism. If the front surface of your eye, the cornea, isn't perfectly round and instead has a slightly oval, football-like shape, light doesn't focus onto a single point the way it should. That's astigmatism, and it causes blur at every distance, not just up close or far away. If you have meaningful astigmatism, and D, choose a standard lens without correcting for it, you'll still be blurry after surgery at every distance without glasses, because the surgery fixed your cataract but never addressed the underlying shape of your cornea. Thankfully, there's a solution: toric lenses, which have astigmatism correction built directly into the implant. I've had patients who skipped the toric option for their first eye, either because it wasn't offered clearly or they didn't understand the value, and then experienced such a dramatic improvement in clarity once they got the toric lens in their second eye that they told me, point blank, I wish I'd done this the first time around. Not everyone needs a toric lens, and if you're completely fine wearing glasses full-time, that's a perfectly valid choice too. But if your ophthalmologist tells you that you have significant astigmatism, that's a conversation worth taking seriously because the difference in outcome can be substantial. Reason number 2, the wrong focus point was chosen for their lifestyle. This ties closely into everything we just covered, but it deserves its own spotlight because it's genuinely one of the most under-discussed parts of cataract surgery planning. With monofocal and toric monofocal lenses, your surgeon isn't just picking clear vision, they're deciding exactly where in space your clearest vision will land. Want distance to be sharp so you can drive and watch television without glasses? Then your surgeon aims for little to no residual prescription. Want your near vision to be the priority instead because you spend most of your day reading on your phone or doing detailed close-up work? Then your surgeon might intentionally leave you with a small amount of nearsightedness, maybe around -2 diopters, so that up-close objects stay naturally sharp, and you simply reach for a light pair of glasses whenever you need to see something far away. Here's where it gets even more nuanced, and where a lot of regret quietly builds. If you're only having one eye done for now, with the second surgery scheduled sometime later, your existing prescription in the untouched eye matters enormously. Let's say you've worn a strong -4 prescription in both eyes for years, and your surgeon corrects the first eye to have 0 prescription. Sounds great in theory, but now you have one eye seeing perfectly at distance and the other eye still 4 diopters nearsighted. That mismatch between the 2 eyes has a name: anisometropia. And it isn't just inconvenient, it can actively make you feel sick. Patients describe headaches, eye strain, double vision, and even nausea because the brain struggles to merge 2 such different images into one comfortable picture. Generally speaking, most people can tolerate a difference of around 2 diopters between their eyes without major issues. But push much beyond that, and daily life can become surprisingly uncomfortable. This is exactly why the conversation with your surgeon shouldn't just be about the eye currently being treated. It needs to include a clear plan for your second eye and the timeline for getting it done, so you're never left in that uncomfortable middle ground for longer than necessary. Reason number 3, dry eye symptoms flare up and catch patients off guard. Nobody expects to walk out of cataract surgery with itchy, gritty, irritated eyes, but it happens far more often than most people anticipate, and it's rarely talked about ahead of time. Cataract surgery, even though it's remarkably precise and minimally invasive by modern standards, still involves an incision and manipulation of delicate eye tissue, and that can temporarily disrupt the natural tear film that keeps your eyes comfortable and lubricated. For most patients, this shows up redness or a feeling like there's an eyelash stuck in your eye that just won't go away. And one more thing worth saying clearly: tax laws, retirement rules, Social Security regulations, and financial policies can vary significantly depending on where you live, whether that's a different country, state, province, or even local jurisdiction. The principles I'm sharing today apply broadly, but always verify the specific rules that apply to your location. And please consult a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any major retirement decisions. If that sounds fair, and before we go any further, do me one small favor right now. Hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Jack Retires and turn on notifications. This is exactly the kind of information that rarely gets said out loud until those years are already gone, and I want to make sure you never miss it. All right, let's talk about how the tax man quietly steals your time. Section 1. The fear that keeps you working longer than you needed to. Here's the first, and maybe the most expensive, way the tax system steals your time. It convinces you that you can't afford to stop working yet, when the truth is, you very often can. It sounds like this in your head. If I retire now, my withdrawals will be taxed, my Social Security might be taxed, I'll lose the steady paycheck, I'd better work one more year to be safe, and then one more year, and then one more after that. Each year feels responsible. Each year feels cautious. And each year is another healthy year handed over, never to return. Here's what's really going on underneath that fear. Most people have never actually looked at the numbers. They carry a vague dread of taxes and retirement, a sense that the tax man is waiting to devour them the moment they stop earning. And that dread keeps them chained to a desk long after they had enough to walk away. But here's what happens when people finally sit down and honestly look at what their income would be, where it would come from, and what it would actually be taxed at. They are almost always stunned. The tax bill they were so terrified of turns out to be far smaller and far more manageable than the monster their imagination had built. The fear was real. The reason for it usually was not. And notice how the fear feeds on itself. The longer you avoid looking at the actual numbers, the bigger and vaguer the threat becomes in your mind, and the more reasonable it feels to wait just one more year. The avoidance and the fear grow together, each making the other worse, while your healthy years quietly drain away in the background. Let me make this concrete, because it happens constantly. Single best, most irreplaceable window, earning money he very likely already had enough of to avoid a tax threat he has never once sat down and measured. Research actually backs this up in a striking way. One study looking at patients with absolutely no prior history of dry eye found that over a third of them, or roughly 37%, went on to develop dry eye symptoms after their cataract procedure. If you already deal with dry eyes before surgery, the odds of a flare-up afterward climb even higher. The encouraging part of this story is that for the vast majority of patients, this is a temporary chapter, not a permanent one. Symptoms typically ease up over the following weeks to months with the help of artificial tears, warm compresses, and sometimes a short course of prescription drops. But here's the key takeaway. The best time to address dry eye isn't after surgery, it's before. If your eyes are already inflamed, irritated, or lacking adequate moisture heading into the operating room, that baseline problem tends to get amplified afterward. Ophthalmologists who take dry eye seriously during your pre-surgical evaluation and actively treat it beforehand are setting you up for a far more comfortable recovery. So if your eyes have felt dry, tired, or irritated in the months leading up to your surgery, speak up about it early. Don't wait until it's a bigger problem after the fact. Reason number 4, other eye conditions were quietly limiting vision the entire time. This one is emotionally difficult for patients, and honestly, it's difficult for us as surgeons to deliver too. Cataracts cloud the natural lens of your eye, and removing that cloudy lens genuinely restores clarity for the vast majority of people. But a cataract is often not the only thing going on inside an aging eye. During a thorough pre-surgical evaluation, it's common to discover other conditions hiding alongside the cataract. Things like glaucoma, macular degeneration, retinal bleeding from diabetes, or scarring on the cornea from an old injury or infection. These conditions live in different structures of the eye entirely, and cataract surgery, no matter how skillfully performed, does absolutely nothing to treat them. This creates a genuinely painful mismatch between hope and reality. Patients understandably walk into surgery hoping their vision problems, all of them, will finally be solved. And when their ophthalmologist has done a careful, honest evaluation beforehand, they've likely already been told, yes, we can absolutely improve your vision by removing this cataract, but you also have glaucoma, and that's a separate condition we'll need to manage separately because this surgery won't touch it. When that conversation happens clearly and early, patients tend to walk away satisfied because their expectations were realistic from the start. They knew going in that some improvement, not a total transformation, was on the table. But when that conversation doesn't happen, or happens too quickly, or gets glossed over, patients emerge from surgery confused and let down, wondering why their vision still isn't where they hoped it would be. For advanced conditions like significant macular degeneration or advanced glaucoma, there currently isn't a treatment that reverses the vision loss those diseases have already caused. This is precisely why a genuinely comprehensive eye exam before surgery, one that looks well beyond just the cataract itself, is so critical. It's not about lowering your hopes, it's about making sure your hopes are pointed at something achievable. Reason number 5, floaters don't disappear, and sometimes they seem to multiply. This is one of the most common questions I get asked in consultations, almost without fail. Once you remove my cataract, will my floaters finally go away? And I understand exactly why people ask. Floaters are those little specks, threads, or cobwebs that drift across your field of vision, especially noticeable against a bright sky or a plain white wall, and they can be genuinely bothersome. But the honest answer is no. Cataract surgery will not make them disappear, and here's the reason why. Floaters form inside the vitreous, the clear, gel-like substance that fills the back chamber of your eye. Cataract surgery, on the other hand, takes place entirely at the front of the eye, where your natural lens sits. Surgeons aren't going anywhere near the vitreous during a standard cataract procedure, so there's no mechanism by which the surgery could possibly clear those floaters out. In fact, here's the twist that surprises a lot of patients. Once your cataract is removed and your vision becomes sharper and clearer overall, floaters that were previously masked by the cloudiness of the cataract often become more noticeable, not less. It can genuinely feel like you've developed brand new floaters overnight, when in reality, you're simply seeing your existing ones with much greater clarity now that the fog is lifted. The reassuring news is that for most patients, floaters tend to settle down and become far less distracting over the following 3 to 6 months, as your brain adjusts and the floaters themselves shift position within the eye. But walking into surgery already understanding this ahead of time changes everything about how you interpret that experience afterward. Instead of panicking and feeling like something went wrong, you'll recognize it for exactly what it is, a normal, expected part of the recovery process. So let's bring this all together, because I don't want you walking away from this video feeling anxious about a surgery that, for the overwhelming majority of people, genuinely changes their life for the better. What separates the small handful of disappointed patients from the vast majority who are absolutely thrilled with their results almost never comes down to surgical skill or bad luck. It comes down to information, timing, and honest conversations that happen before the surgery, not after. Choose your lens based on an honest look at your daily life, not a sales pitch promising perfection, because every lens option involves genuine trade-offs, and understanding them ahead of time is what turns a good outcome into a satisfying one. Talk through your focus point with real specifics: how much you drive, how much you read, how much time you spend staring at. Screens at arm's length, and make sure your surgeon knows the full plan for both eyes, not just the one currently being treated. If your eyes have felt dry or irritated recently, bring it up early so it can be treated before surgery rather than managed as a surprise afterward. Ask directly whether you have any other eye conditions besides your cataract, and if you do, get a clear, honest picture of what surgery can and can't fix. And finally, if you deal with floaters, go in already understanding that they're here to stay, at least for now, so you're not blindsided by something completely normal. There's actually a simple exercise I recommend to every single patient before their consultation, and I want to share it with you too, because it takes less than 10 minutes and it can completely change how prepared you feel walking into that appointment. Grab a piece of paper and write down a rough timeline of your typical day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Note down every single activity where your vision matters. Checking your phone the moment you open your eyes, driving to work or running errands, sitting in front of a computer screen for hours, reading a physical book or a tablet in the evening, cooking dinner and reading labels or recipes, watching television across the room, maybe golfing or gardening or doing needlework on the weekends. Once you have that list, go through it and mark each activity as near, intermediate, or distance vision. You'll very quickly start to see a pattern emerge, a rough percentage of your day that leans toward one distance over another. Bring that list with you to your consultation. It gives your surgeon something concrete and personal to work with, rather than a generic conversation about lens options that doesn't actually reflect how you live your life. I promise you, surgeons appreciate this kind of preparation far more than patients realize, because it lets us tailor a recommendation instead of guessing. It's also worth mentioning that technology in this field continues to improve every single year. Newer generations of premium lenses are steadily reducing the glare and halo effects that used to be far more pronounced, and measurement tools used to calculate your ideal lens power have become dramatically more precise over the last decade. None of this means every trade-off has disappeared, but it does mean that the experience patients have today is, in many ways, better than what patients experienced even 5 or 10 years ago. Don't let outdated stories from a friend or family member who had this surgery a decade ago completely shape your expectations. Ask your own surgeon what technology they're currently using and how it compares to older generations of lenses. One more thing I want to leave you with, because I think it gets lost in all the technical detail. This decision doesn't need to feel overwhelming, and you're not expected to. Become an expert in optics overnight. Your job isn't to diagnose yourself or predict every possible outcome. Your job is simply to show up to that consultation with genuine curiosity, ask the questions we've talked about today, and be honest about your lifestyle and your priorities. A good surgeon will take it from there, walk you through your specific options, and help you land on a decision that actually fits your life, not just a generic recommendation pulled off a menu. Cataract surgery remains one of the most successful, most transformative procedures in all of medicine, and the statistics genuinely back that up. But like any medical decision, satisfaction comes down to aligning expectations with reality before you ever step into the operating room. I'll say this again because it bears repeating. The vast majority of patients who undergo this surgery describe it as life-changing, and honestly, one of the most common things I hear afterward isn't regret at all, it's the opposite. It's patients telling me, I only wish I'd done this sooner. If this video helped clear up questions you didn't even know you had, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos where we break down exactly what to expect from eye surgery, recovery, and everything in between. And if you want to go even deeper before your own procedure, I've got another video walking through absolutely everything you need to know before having cataract surgery. So go check that out next. Take care of your eyes, ask the right questions, and I'll see you in the next one.